Uncovering the Mother Wound, a soul-level healing journey. The hand that rocks the cradle is the hand that rules the world. This old saying reminds us just how profoundly a mother's influence shapes our soul. But what happens when that influence leaves behind more wounds than warmth? On Spiritual Wisdom, today's video dives deep into the emotional and spiritual terrain of the mother wound, a hidden imprint that silently affects our relationships, self-worth, and inner peace. Drawing on Carl Jung's timeless insights, we invite you to explore how this wound is not just personal, but ancestral and collective, and more importantly, how it can be healed. As you watch, ask yourself, have I truly faced the parts of me shaped by unmet needs and silent pain? Leave a comment below and share your thoughts. Your story may help someone else begin their healing too. Let's begin this journey of soul-level transformation together. 1. The mother wound is real and often invisible. Society paints motherhood as the ultimate expression of unconditional love, warmth, and nurturing. But beneath that romanticized image lies a truth many carry in silence: the mother's wound. It's a deep, often invisible imprint left on the soul when maternal love is inconsistent, manipulative, rejecting, or entirely absent. Whether the wound was born from overt trauma, like emotional coldness or abandonment, or from covert control masked as care, its effects are profound. It shapes how you see yourself, how safe you feel being emotionally vulnerable, and how you navigate intimacy and self-worth. You may have learned early on that love had to be earned, that your feelings were too much, or that your needs were inconvenient. As a result, you adapted. You became the pleaser, the perfectionist, the fixer, the one who sacrificed authenticity for approval. But that survival strategy came at a cost: a fractured connection to your true self, and a soul still waiting to feel safe enough to exist without apology. The mother wound is not just a memory from childhood. It's alive in adulthood in the form of people-pleasing, boundary issues, burnout, or relationships that mirror emotional instability. It hides behind your high achieving, your self-doubt, your tendency to shrink so others feel comfortable. And yet, this wound often goes unspoken, buried under guilt, especially in a culture that deifies mothers and shames any narrative that contradicts that ideal. But healing begins when you stop defending the pain and start naming it. This is not about blame, it's about the truth. It's about validating the part of your soul that never felt fully seen or cherished. Carl Jung reminds us that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. And so, we must become conscious of how this wound has shaped our identity, our beliefs about love, and our relationship to power and worth. Healing the mother's wound doesn't mean cutting ties or holding grudges. It means reclaiming the emotional real estate that has long been occupied by fear, guilt, or unmet expectations. It means learning to mother yourself to meet your own emotional needs with gentleness, with clarity, and with compassion. It means allowing your soul to grieve the love it didn't receive, and then choosing, over and over, to give yourself the love that was missing. And as you do, the old patterns begin to dissolve. You no longer need to chase validation. You no longer confuse control for care. You begin to feel safe in your truth and whole in your presence. This is the quiet revolution of soul healing. It's invisible on the outside, but internally, it changes everything. If you've ever faced the silent pain of a complicated mother-child relationship. We invite you to share your story in the comments. It could help someone feel less alone. And if you're just beginning to explore this healing journey, comment, "I'm ready to heal," so we can walk this path together, one soul at a time. 2. The pain is internalized and passed on. When a child grows up without feeling fully seen, safe, or unconditionally loved by the one person who was meant to offer those things, the wound left behind is not just emotional, it's soul deep. Carl Jung's insight that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate, speaks directly to this truth. The mother's wound isn't always visible. It doesn't always come from overt abuse or cruelty. Often, it is born from emotional absence, silent criticism, or a love that felt conditional. Over time, that subtle ache transforms into a set of internal beliefs that whisper, "I'm not good enough," "My needs are a burden," or "I must earn love to deserve it." And without realizing it, these beliefs start to shape how you relate to everything: your boundaries, your self-worth, your relationships, your success. Take the story of Mia, a high-achieving woman who can never rest without guilt. She constantly says yes, even when she's exhausted, seeking validation in every area of her life. On the surface, she's accomplished, but inside, she feels like an imposter. This isn't a personality flaw, it's a survival response. Her mother was present physically, but emotionally distant, only showing affection when Mia performed well. That taught her that love is earned, not given freely. Carl Jung would say that Mia isn't just reacting to her present, it's her unconscious past that's playing out in her present behavior. These soul-level imprints don't start with us, but they live within us until we name them. And if we don't, we pass them down. Because unhealed wounds always find expression, usually in the next generation. That's why the journey of healing the mother wound isn't about assigning blame. It's about reclaiming the parts of ourselves that we abandoned to stay loved. When you finally recognize that what you thought was your personality perfectionism, people-pleasing, emotional numbness, was actually a set of coping strategies to survive emotional disconnection, you begin to open a doorway back to your soul. You stop chasing external approval and start offering yourself the unconditional presence you always craved. You stop running from your pain and begin to witness it with compassion. This is what soul-level healing looks like, not fixing yourself, but remembering that you were never broken to begin with. Healing doesn't require your mother's apology or her understanding. It only requires your willingness to see the wound and hold it differently. As you learn to mother yourself, your nervous system softens, your boundaries strengthen, your voice becomes clearer. You are no longer a child waiting to be chosen. You are the adult choosing yourself again and again. And in doing so, you become the one who ends the generational story of silence, shame, and self-abandonment. The wound may not have started with you, but the healing can and must start with you. Because your soul remembers everything, and it's waiting for you to return to the truth that you are already enough, already worthy, already whole. Don't forget to subscribe for more spiritual wisdom on breaking generational patterns and healing the hidden wounds that shape our identity. Your journey to conscious transformation starts here. 3. Attachment patterns stem from early maternal bonds. Attachment theory reveals a powerful truth that the emotional patterns we carry into adulthood are often echoes of the bond we formed with our mother in our earliest days. If that bond was nurturing and stable, it planted the seeds of security, trust, and self-worth. But if it was marked by absence, criticism, unpredictability, or emotional coldness, it left a spiritual wound so deep it shaped how we give and receive love. Many walk through life with anxious attachment, clinging tightly to relationships in fear of abandonment, constantly needing reassurance because deep down, they were never sure love would stay. Others develop avoidant attachment, keeping people at arm's length, building walls instead of bridges, because intimacy feels like a risk they can't afford. And some are caught in a disorganized pattern, simultaneously yearning for connection and fearing it, approaching only to pull away, trapped in a confusing dance of emotional chaos that began in a home where love was both the prize and the punishment. These aren't personality flaws. They're survival strategies, coping mechanisms crafted by a child trying to make sense of a mother's inconsistent signals. Carl Jung once said, "The greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of the parent." And in that one sentence lies the heartbreaking reality of the mother's wound. Because so often, we didn't just receive our mother's affection, we inherited her fears, her shame, her silence, her inability to love herself, and her longing to be loved in return. We became the emotional container for her unmet needs, and in the process, many of us lost touch with our own. The spiritual wound is not just about what happened, it's about what didn't happen. It's about the hugs that weren't given, the words that weren't spoken, the safety that wasn't felt, the gaze that never fully saw you. And that absence of nourishment leaves a soul starving for recognition, aching for love, and confused about its worth. This wound seeps into every corner of life. It influences how you choose partners, how you react to feedback, how you set or violate your own boundaries, how you chase success to prove your worth, or sabotage it out of guilt. It whispers in your ear, telling you you're too much when you express your emotions, or not enough when you ask to be seen. But healing this is not about turning against your mother. It's about turning toward yourself with fierce compassion. It's about reparenting the inner child who had to grow up too fast, who never felt fully chosen, and who still believes love must be earned through self-betrayal. Spiritual healing means becoming the mother you never had. It means sitting with your wounds without shame, honoring the pain without becoming it, and finally giving yourself the tenderness you always craved. The moment you begin to see your emotional triggers not as flaws, but as messages from your soul asking to be heard, everything begins to shift. You no longer chase love. You attract it through authenticity. You no longer fear abandonment. You embrace solitude as sacred space. You no longer repeat cycles. You create new patterns rooted in self-trust. The nervous system begins to calm. The need for external validation fades, and slowly, the child within you feels safe enough to rest. Healing the mother's wound is a spiritual awakening. It's the act of remembering who you were before the world told you who to be. It's peeling back the layers of adaptation to rediscover the soul that has always been whole underneath. And while this journey isn't easy, it is the gateway to freedom. Because once you mother yourself with unconditional love, you stop searching for it in people who cannot give it. You stop trying to fix what someone else broke. You stop confusing love with pain. And in that sacred reclamation, you don't just heal, you transform. 4. The inner mother must be transformed, not the real one. So many of us silently carry a hunger we can't quite name, the aching need for the love, safety, and acceptance that should have come from our mother, but never did. We grow up learning to survive emotional deserts, navigating life with a deep-rooted sense that something essential was missing. But what if the answer isn't found in waiting for your mother to change or finally say the words you've longed to hear? What if the real healing begins when you realize that the transformation doesn't depend on her at all, but on you? Carl Jung taught that within every human being lives an archetype called the Great Mother, a psychic blueprint that shapes how we love, nurture, and relate to the feminine. This inner figure, embedded deep within your soul, is not your literal mother, but the emotional imprint of how you experienced her. If she was critical, absent, cold, or controlling, that distortion becomes internalized, and the voice you now hear inside may not be your own, it might be hers. And so, you don't just inherit her genes, you inherit her emotional patterns, her pain, her silence, and her inability to give what she never received. Healing the mother wound at the soul level means shifting the internalized image of her that still governs your sense of worth. This isn't about blame, it's about liberation. It's about understanding that the mother you needed can now be rebirthed within you through intention, compassion, and spiritual courage. That means gently confronting the inner critic that mimics her voice and replacing it with the voice of the healed mother archetype, the one who is unconditionally loving, endlessly nurturing, and fiercely protective. It means grieving what was missing without shame and choosing to show up for your own needs with presence and power. This process is not linear. One moment you might feel rage, the next, sorrow, then profound clarity. But each step you take toward reshaping that inner bond is a radical act of soul reclamation. You begin to mother yourself in the way you were never mothered, setting boundaries not out of rebellion, but from reverence, speaking to yourself with tenderness instead of punishment, no longer performing for love, but embodying it from within. As you do this, the grip of the old mother's wound begins to loosen, and a new story takes root, one in which you are no longer the child begging to be seen, but the soul awakening to its own divine nurturance. You don't need your actual mother to become someone else. You only need to stop waiting for the love that never came and start becoming the source of it for yourself. Because true freedom is not found in her transformation, it's found in yours. If you're still with us on this healing journey, comment, "I'm transforming within," below. Your reflections help us grow this space for deep emotional and spiritual healing. 5. The persona and shadow are born from the mother complex. To survive childhood, many of us unconsciously shape ourselves into someone we think will be loved. What Carl Jung called the persona, the obedient child, assistant, the helper, the one who doesn't make waves. In doing so, we exile parts of ourselves that felt too messy, too needy, too angry, too emotional into the shadow. Over time, this split creates inner tension, manifesting in adulthood as anxiety, guilt, emotional numbness, or the painful urge to please everyone while quietly losing ourselves. You might feel like you're constantly performing, showing up with a smile even when you're exhausted, or swallowing your truth just to keep the peace. And the saddest part is, you may not even know why, only that something feels hollow. This deep fracture, this internal war, often stems from the mother complex, the emotional pattern we form in response to how love was given or withheld by our mothers. Carl Jung understood that our healing doesn't lie in rejecting the mother or blaming her, but in integrating the parts of ourselves we once had to abandon. One woman I worked with had spent her entire life striving to be perfect wife, perfect employee, perfect daughter, but she was emotionally burnt out and riddled with self-doubt. When we traced her exhaustion to its roots, we found a little girl who learned she could only earn love by being flawless. That child never got to rest, to say no, to just be. The spiritual journey of individuation invites us to go inward, not to fix ourselves, but to reclaim the parts we exiled. It means letting the angry parts speak. It means holding the sorrowful self close. It means asking, who am I when I am no longer performing for approval? It means realizing that the parts of yourself you were taught to suppress were not shameful. They were sacred. As Jung said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Healing the mother's wound is not about confronting your mother. It's about confronting the truth within yourself. It's about creating safety in your own soul for emotions that once felt dangerous. It's about knowing you are not ungrateful for telling the truth. You are not dramatic for feeling deeply. You are not weak for wanting to be loved without conditions. The mother's wound is real, but so is your capacity to heal it. And that healing begins when you stop running from your shadow and start listening to it. So here's what I want you to remember. Your pain is not imaginary. It's inherited, but it's also interruptible. You can still love your mother and acknowledge what hurt. Your shadow is not a flaw. It is a guide. Healing does not require perfection. It requires presence. And wholeness isn't something you achieve. It's something you remember, because your soul was never broken, only buried beneath the masks you wore to survive. 6. Archetypes, like anima and animus, are also distorted. The mother's wound isn't just emotional, it's spiritual, ancestral, and deeply archetypal. Carl Jung's insights into the unconscious remind us that the patterns we carry often begin in silence, in childhood, and get etched into the soul. Men with unresolved mother wounds often find themselves drawn to emotionally distant or controlling partners, not because they want to suffer, but because their psyche is trying to recreate the pain of not being nurtured, in the secret hope that this time it might finally lead to healing. It's not weakness, it's a spiritual reenactment of an unmet need, a subconscious longing to be chosen and seen by the feminine energy that once felt cold or unavailable. For women, the mother wound doesn't always show up in relationships with others. It often turns inward, becoming a harsh, punishing inner voice. This is the distorted animus, the masculine archetype within, which instead of protecting and guiding, becomes a critic demanding perfection, productivity, and relentless self-discipline. It's the voice that tells her she is never enough, never doing enough, never lovable unless she's achieving. These distorted archetypes, anima and animus, are not random flaws. They are spiritual symptoms of generational pain and emotional inheritance. Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." And that's exactly what the mother wound does. It hides in the shadows, replaying itself in failed relationships, burnout, anxiety, and self-sabotage, all while whispering that this is just how life is. But it isn't. This is not fate. It's a wound, and wounds can heal. To begin the journey is to stop blaming and start becoming aware, not of what she did or didn't do, but of the parts of you that formed in response to it. Healing is not about rewriting your childhood or confronting your mother. It's about rewriting the voice in your head, the rules in your nervous system, the beliefs in your soul. It's about recognizing that your inner critic may not be you. It may be her voice, her fear, her wound echoing through your being. And once you see that, you begin to reclaim yourself. The spiritual path back to wholeness begins when you stop seeing your pain as a burden and begin to see it as a teacher. That ache you feel in your chest, that's not drama or weakness. That's your soul asking to be heard. That's your sacred self calling you back. Healing the mother wound is a soul-level awakening. It's learning to mother yourself in the way you were never mothered, to create a home within your own heart, to stop performing and start receiving. And when you do, you don't just heal, you liberate. You break the cycle not only for yourself, but for every generation that comes after you. Now, take a deep breath, soften your body, and bring awareness to the voices within. Are they truly yours, or echoes of a wounded past? If this message speaks to your soul, comment, "I'm reclaiming my inner voice," below, and let the healing begin. 7. Healing involves awareness, release, and reparenting. There is a kind of grief that doesn't always scream. It simmers beneath perfectionism, people-pleasing, emotional detachment, or an aching loneliness that even love can't quite soothe. This grief, rooted in the absence or distortion of maternal love, leaves behind a soul-level wound that silently shapes how you trust, how you relate, how you speak to yourself when no one's listening. It's not always born from obvious abuse. Sometimes it's the cold tone, the missed eye contact, the love that came with conditions, or the constant message that your emotions were too much. Carl Jung once said, "The greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of the parent." And when your mother never healed her pain, you were often handed the weight of it. But healing does not begin with blame. It begins with awareness. The moment you name what was missing, what hurt, what shaped your identity in silence. This awareness cracks the illusion that your childhood was fine just because your physical needs were met, and it gives you permission to stop normalizing emotional starvation. Once awareness takes root, the next step is release, learning to let go of the buried rage, grief, and longing in a way that honors the child you were and the adult you are becoming. Tools like letter writing allow you to say what was never safe to speak. Inner child dialogues give voice to parts of you frozen in time. The empty chair method lets you express what your younger self needed to scream. Visualization helps you see yourself holding that child with the tenderness no one else could give. These aren't just techniques. They are sacred encounters with the soul, where you finally make contact with the pain that has been living inside you for decades. And then comes the reparenting, not as a concept, but as a daily spiritual practice. You become the mother you always needed, patient, present, warm, and strong. You start speaking to yourself in ways that soothe instead of shame, and you begin offering your inner child what she was once denied: comfort, safety, joy, and permission to be messy, loud, or sad without punishment. This is the essence of soul work, to rebuild the inner scaffolding from which you live, so that your choices are no longer shaped by old wounds, but by deep self-trust. Jungian therapy supports this beautifully, helping you recognize the inner archetypes that have ruled your life: the inner critic, the abandoned child, the hero, the shadow, and slowly transform them into allies rather than saboteurs. As the internal landscape shifts, your external life changes too. You stop needing others to validate you because you've become your own emotional home. You stop chasing love and start attracting it from a place of sovereignty. You stop apologizing for your existence and start living from your soul. The mother wound no longer owns your narrative. It becomes the very soil from which your healing grows. 8. You can break the cycle and reclaim wholeness. You can break the cycle and reclaim your wholeness, not through blame or resentment, but by stepping into the quiet power of awareness, presence, and emotional responsibility. Healing is not about fixing the past or waiting for apologies that may never come. It's about no longer abandoning yourself in the ways others once did. As Carl Jung said, "He who looks inside awakens." And when you dare to look inward with honesty instead of shame, you begin to understand that your pain was never proof of your failure, but a call to awaken. Maybe you grew up in a home where love was conditional, where emotional neglect or constant criticism taught you that you had to earn affection. That silence was safer than honesty. That pain doesn't disappear just because you grow older. It hides in your relationships, your fears, your self-talk. One woman, outwardly thriving with a beautiful family and successful business, confessed that every achievement still left her empty. She wasn't chasing goals. She was chasing the mother who never truly saw her. Her healing didn't begin with confrontation. It began when she allowed herself to grieve, not just the mother she had, but the nurturing she never received. That moment of truth broke the trance of generational pain. Because healing at the soul level begins when you stop running and start feeling, when you stop waiting for someone else to validate your wounds and begin holding your inner child in compassion. Carl Jung warned that until we make the unconscious conscious, it will rule our lives and we will call it fate. And so, every time you catch yourself repeating an old pattern of shutting down, self-sabotaging, criticizing yourself in your mother's voice, and choose something different, you are rewriting fate. Not with perfection, but with presence. You don't need to be flawless to heal. You need honesty. You need the courage to stay present when your triggers flare up. You need the humility to forgive your parents without excusing their harm, and the strength to reparent yourself in ways they never could. This isn't about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you were before the shame, before the conditioning, before you learned to hide your light to feel safe. It's about recognizing that you are not your mother's silence, her rejection, or her wounds. You are the one who stops the cycle by choosing self-love over self-abandonment, truth over performance, and soul alignment over survival. The value of this journey lies not in becoming perfect, but in becoming whole, one choice, one breath, one honest moment at a time. If this message spoke to a part of you that's ready to break the cycle and return to your true self, I'd love to hear how you're choosing presence and emotional responsibility in your own journey. Drop a comment below and share your story. Or if this resonates deeply, simply type, "I choose wholeness," to affirm your path forward. Thank you for joining us on this soul-level journey into healing the mother wound. Remember, acknowledging your pain is not weakness. It's the first act of courage on the path to wholeness. As Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." If this message resonated with you, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who may need it, and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom for more transformative insights. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss our upcoming videos, each one designed to guide you deeper into your healing and spiritual awakening. Your journey matters, your soul matters, and you are never alone. If a person does this, they hate you a lot. They damaged you intentionally. The reason for evil in the world is that people are not able to tell their stories. Carl Jung. Sometimes, the darkest truths are hidden in plain sight, masked by politeness, cloaked in excuses. In today's video from Spiritual Wisdom, we explore one of Carl Jung's most unsettling revelations. When someone intentionally harms you, it's not always a misunderstanding. It may be a reflection of something far more sinister lurking within their psyche. What if the betrayal you endured wasn't an accident, but a conscious act rooted in deep psychological contempt? As you watch, reflect on the patterns in your own life. Have you ever ignored the signs because the truth felt too heavy? Share your thoughts in the comments. Has someone ever revealed their shadow to you through cruelty? Let's begin this journey into the hidden layers of the human soul. 1. Intentional harm is a shadow-driven act. According to Carl Jung, when someone hurts you intentionally, it's not a misunderstanding. It's not an accident. It's a conscious act driven by the darkest parts of their psyche. This is the shadow at work, the hidden, unconscious force that stores everything a person represses: hatred, envy, rage, and cruelty. When someone acts from this place, their soul is no longer responding to you as a human being, but as a projection of something they despise within themselves. This isn't a slip of emotion or an impulsive outburst. It's a slow brewing storm from within, where their contempt has silently grown roots. Jung warned that contempt is one of the most dangerous psychological states because it strips away empathy and replaces it with self-righteous cruelty. It justifies harm in the mind of the aggressor. In their world, you're no longer a soul with feelings. You're an object, a target, a symbol of what they can't control within themselves. The scariest part is that they often don't even know they're doing it. They believe their actions are rational, even deserved. And that is the hallmark of the unexamined shadow it destroys without guilt and damages without pause. They don't just dislike you. They've erased your humanity in order to feel powerful. This psychological erasure gives them permission to violate boundaries, twist your words, sabotage your peace, and still sleep at night. That is not a mistake. That is not love confused. That is spiritual disconnection at its core. Their soul has closed off the path of reflection, and instead, their shadow takes the wheel. And when that happens, their presence becomes toxic, their love conditional, and their words coded in manipulation. If you've ever been on the receiving end of this kind of harm, know that your pain is not an overreaction. It is your soul trying to alert you that something deeply unnatural has occurred. You are not overthinking. You are spiritually aware. The energy feels wrong because it is wrong. Your body, your intuition, your higher self can all detect when the soul of another has turned away from the light. You might try to rationalize it, give them chances, assume the best, but the truth remains. When someone's shadow has chosen to attack you, your response is not to fix them, it's to protect your soul. You are not called to be their healer. You are called to be your own guardian. Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." But if you keep excusing intentional harm as confusion or weakness, you will lose years trying to love someone who is silently at war with themselves and taking it out on you. Your soul is sacred. Your presence is not disposable. You are not here to be a dumping ground for someone else's unresolved pain. The spiritual path asks for compassion, yes, but also discernment. Because not all broken people want to heal. Some want control. Some want power. Some want you to shrink so they can feel tall. And the most dangerous ones will hurt you on purpose and still convince you that you're the problem. That is not love. That is a soul consumed by shadow. And no amount of empathy will save them if they are not willing to face their own reflection. You must recognize when someone is using their wounds as weapons. You must trust what your soul feels, even if your mind wants to give them another chance. Because true healing does not happen in the presence of intentional harm. It happens in truth, in awareness, in soul-level clarity. And sometimes, the most spiritual thing you can do is walk away, not with hate, but with holy reverence for your own soul. Have you ever experienced harm that felt too deliberate to be accidental? If so, share your thoughts or story in the comments so others can learn from your insight. If not, comment, "I'm learning to see the shadow, and let's explore the deeper truth together." 2. Contempt justifies cruelty. Carl Jung exposed a chilling truth about the human psyche. Contempt isn't just an emotion, it's a psychological weapon. When someone feels contempt for you, they don't simply dislike you. They erase your humanity in their mind and construct a moral story where harming you becomes justified. You're no longer seen as a person with feelings and dignity. You become an object of punishment, a symbol of something they claim deserves to be degraded. And what's most disturbing is how logical and righteous it can all appear to them. Jung described contempt as the most dangerous emotional state because it doesn't just create distance, it builds a narrative where cruelty feels deserved. The person who holds this contempt may speak calmly, smile politely, or maintain a mask of civility. But beneath that surface lies a calculated belief that you are less than. This isn't a moment of anger. It's a system of thought designed to legitimize emotional violence. You see this in real life more often than you think. Take the case of a man who quietly excels at his job, who helps others without fanfare, who avoids drama. One day, a new manager arrives, someone charming, but subtly power-hungry, someone who thrives on dominance masked as leadership. The manager starts dismissing ideas, questioning intentions, making jokes that sting, but it's not playful, it's surgical. Over time, the manager reframes this man's presence as a threat or a nuisance, whispering criticisms behind closed doors, assigning blame in meetings, erasing credit for hard work. By the time the man notices the pattern, the damage is deep. His reputation is dented, his confidence shaken, and the worst part is the internal confusion. What did I do wrong? The answer lies in Jung's shadow theory. Some people, when unable to face their own pain or insecurity, project it outward. They assign it to someone else, someone who unconsciously triggers their hidden wounds. Contempt becomes a tool for control, and their cruelty becomes disguised as leadership, as honesty, as just doing their job. This is why Jung's teachings are so vital, because they teach us to read beneath the surface of people's actions and to recognize when something far more dangerous is at play. If someone consistently acts in ways that diminish you, belittle your worth, and justify harm while keeping their conscience clean, you're not dealing with random misbehavior. You're facing a soul that has chosen to distort reality in order to protect its own fractured self-image. The truth is, many people cannot handle the light you carry. They don't know how to meet it with honesty or growth, so instead, they attack it. And when that light reflects something unresolved within them, their contempt isn't just about you, it's about their refusal to evolve. You must learn to see contempt for what it is, a reflection of their brokenness, not your value. Don't explain it away. Don't internalize it. Don't make it your mission to be understood by someone who has already rewritten the story to make you the villain. Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Let this be the moment you recognize the unconscious patterns in others for what they are: projections, not truths. Choose your peace over their poison. Protect your soul. 3. The shadow uses masks to hide malice. The shadow doesn't always scream. Hated often whispers it behind a smile, cloaked in false concern, strategic silence, or spiritual language that sounds holy but feels hollow. Carl Jung's dark truth reminds us that the deepest malice often hides behind the appearance of morality, and that's what makes it so dangerous. When someone's shadow is active, it doesn't necessarily come to destroy you with fire. It comes dressed as care, as friendship, as calm detachment. But underneath it all is a quiet intention to undermine, to control, to erode you subtly while appearing blameless. These people won't always lash out. Instead, they'll manipulate the energy of a room, twist your words when no one's watching, or smile while making sure your success doesn't go too far. That's because the shadow thrives in denial. It's a part of the human psyche that refuses to admit its own darkness, so it masks it in politeness, spiritual superiority, or carefully crafted silence. Actions, Jung taught us, speak louder than words. And in truth, when someone repeatedly forgets your joys, but always remembers your failures, when they disappear in your pain, but show up to criticize your healing, this is not accidental, it's psychological warfare. It's their shadow, projecting its own self-hate onto your growth. Because when someone cannot handle their own inadequacy, your confidence becomes threatening. When they feel unseen in their own life, your light becomes offensive. And so, instead of looking inward and healing spiritually, they choose the easier path to mask their envy in detachment, their jealousy in subtle digs, their contempt in silence. This kind of spiritual sabotage is rarely dramatic. It's slow, it's quiet, it's calculated. And by the time you realize it, you've often already begun to shrink yourself to survive their presence. The truth is, not everyone clapping for you is celebrating you. Some are only near you to study you, to find your cracks, to feel superior in your moments of weakness. And here's what makes it worse. They often tell themselves they love you. They convince themselves their absence is justified. Their critiques are helpful. Their emotional withdrawal is simply boundaries. But your soul knows the difference. You feel the cold energy, the dissonance, the spiritual rejection that has no name but feels like death by 1,000 cuts. This is why it's essential to watch behavior, not listen to empty words. Because while people may pretend, energy does not. Their shadow tells the truth in patterns, in repetition, in the discomfort you feel when they walk into the room, and your spirit tightens instead of relaxing. If someone is erasing your joy, dismissing your voice, or making you feel invisible when you need love the most, that's not confusion, it's contempt. That's not forgetfulness, it's spiritual neglect. And you don't need to wait for louder proof. The subtle signs are enough. The soul speaks in quiet knowing. You don't owe anyone more chances to dim your light just because they won't face their own shadow. Jung didn't teach us this truth to make us bitter. He taught it so we could finally stop gaslighting ourselves and start trusting what we feel. The moment you honor your intuition over someone's polished performance is the moment your spiritual awakening truly begins. Have you ever sensed something dark hiding behind a kind face? If this message resonates, comment below. I will look deeper to commit to seeing through the masks. Let's walk this path of awareness together. 4. Manipulators weaponize intimacy. There's a chilling truth about betrayal that Carl Jung called privileged destruction, when someone who knows your soul intimately uses that sacred knowledge not to love you, but to break you. This kind of pain doesn't come from strangers or accidents. It's delivered with precision by someone who once held your trust, your secrets, your dreams, and your vulnerabilities. They remember the story behind your fears. They know what makes your heart beat faster, and they understand the spiritual values you hold close, and then they aim directly at those places to cause the deepest soul wounds. These attacks are never random. They are calculated spiritual violations. It's not confusion. It's intent. It's not a weakness. It shadows Jung's term for the hidden, darker parts of the psyche, filled with repressed emotions, envy, rage, shame. When left unchecked, the shadow becomes a quiet predator, using familiarity as a disguise. The person hurting you isn't lashing out blindly. They're using your love, your faith, your hope as weapons. And that's what makes it so devastating. They remember your spiritual journey and mock it. They recall your dreams and ridicule them in your weakest moments. They see your gentleness not as beauty, but as a target. And the worst betrayal of all, they make it seem like care. They smile while they destroy you. You're left questioning your reality. You wonder if maybe you overreacted. Maybe you misunderstood. Maybe they didn't mean it that way. But Jung warned us, when contempt takes over, when a person no longer sees you as fully human, they can justify anything. They don't just hurt you. They erase your spiritual dignity, your soul's truth, and your emotional safety. And they do it with a terrifying calm. True love never does this. True love protects the soul, shelters it, nourishes it. But those who manipulate intimacy use your own story against you, turning your openness into ammunition. When they recall a childhood trauma just to win an argument, or use your deepest confession to shame you. They're not angry. They're strategic. That is the darkest part. They aren't reacting. They are orchestrating. And you can feel it. You may not be able to explain it, but your soul knows the difference. There's a spiritual sting in the air, a heaviness that settles when the person who once held your hand now holds a knife behind their back. Jung's insight wasn't just psychological, it was spiritual. He showed us that the shadow, when unleashed, does not fight fair. It studies you. It memorizes you. It mimics care while preparing for your collapse. And that's why healing from this isn't about getting over a fight. It's about reclaiming your soul from someone who tried to break it piece by piece. The danger isn't just in their words. It's in their silence, their timing, the way they strike when you're most open, most human, most hopeful. This is why you must trust the moments your soul feels sick around someone, even when your mind is still making excuses for them. If this message helped you recognize the hidden ways intimacy can be weaponized, be sure to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Let's keep uncovering the deeper truths of the human psyche together. 5. Gaslighting is psychological warfare. Gaslighting is not just a manipulation tactic. It's a form of psychological warfare that distorts your reality until you no longer trust your own mind. Carl Jung's teachings shed light on the depth of this darkness, revealing that when someone operates from their unacknowledged shadow, the hidden, rejected parts of their psyche, they often become dangerous, not through physical harm, but through quiet, calculated psychological destruction. After hurting you, the manipulator doesn't just deny what happened. They rewrite the narrative entirely. They'll tell you you're too sensitive, that you misunderstood, that it wasn't that serious, and little by little, you start to believe it. The worst part is that you begin to feel guilty, not for what you did, but for simply reacting to their abuse. That guilt turns into silence. That silence turns into submission. And eventually, your soul forgets the sound of its own truth. Jung believed that contempt is one of the most chilling emotional states because it strips another human being of their dignity. When a person gaslights you, it's not an accident. They have psychologically erased your right to reality, and by doing so, they've placed themselves in the position of God over your perception. In the real world, this plays out more often than we think. A man constantly ridicules his partner's goals. Then when she cries, tells her she's too emotional. A manager excludes a worker from meetings, then blames them for being uninformed, all while insisting they're just trying to help. These patterns are not random. They're intentional distortions designed to disorient you. Jung warned that the shadow, when left unexamined, doesn't just stay buried. It lashes out. It projects. And the victim of gaslighting becomes the unwilling canvas for someone else's repressed self-hatred. That's why, over time, you begin to feel small, confused, anxious. You doubt your memories, your instincts, your worth. But the truth is, the moment you start asking yourself, "Am I crazy?" the damage has already begun. The manipulator's greatest weapon is not the lie they tell you, but the lie they teach you to tell yourself. What makes gaslighting so spiritually damaging is that it doesn't just harm your emotions, it severs your connection to your inner compass. Carl Jung emphasized that the soul thrives in clarity and authenticity. And when you are constantly fed distortion, your spiritual alignment collapses. You start making yourself smaller, just to keep the peace. You apologize for wounds you didn't cause. You live in fear of speaking up because you've been trained to expect punishment for simply being honest. This is not love. This is control. This is a subtle, silent war on your identity. The manipulator doesn't want you to feel safe. They want you to feel dependent, because a person disconnected from their own truth is easier to dominate. This is why Jung urged us to bring our unconscious patterns into the light, because what remains hidden has the power to enslave us, and what is acknowledged has the power to set us free. Your soul is not crazy. Your feelings are not wrong. And your memories do not need someone else's permission to exist. If someone makes you feel guilty for noticing mistreatment, if they twist your reality to suit their comfort, recognize this for what it is: not a misunderstanding, but a calculated effort to disarm your mind and diminish your spirit. The path forward begins the moment you stop negotiating your truth and start trusting your voice again. 6. Your healing threatens their control. When you start healing, when you begin standing taller and breathing easier, it's not peace that toxic people feel, it's panic. Carl Jung uncovered something few people want to face. Those who once controlled you weren't drawn to your love, your loyalty, or your light. They were drawn to your wounds. Your pain served them. Your brokenness gave them leverage. So when you begin to rise, when your voice steadies and your heart softens toward yourself, it disrupts the entire narrative they built to keep you under their influence. They don't return to say sorry. They return to see if they still have access to the weaker version of you they once controlled. Their presence isn't an accident, it's a test. And this test is spiritual. It challenges not only your boundaries, but your sense of identity. As you shift, their tactics don't evolve, they repeat. Same words, same patterns, same emotional bait, because they are trying to reawaken a version of you that no longer exists. Jung taught that the shadow, the hidden part of our psyche, projects onto others what we refuse to face within. When toxic people sense they're losing control, their shadow lashes out in desperation. It wants to pull you back, to restore the emotional imbalance that gave them power. But now you see differently. You feel the subtle tug of guilt, the manipulation wrapped in charm, and you no longer fall for it. That's because healing isn't just emotional, it's spiritual. It sharpens your intuition. It teaches you to feel the weight behind words, to recognize the energetic difference between truth and deception. And this is what they hate most, not just that you're healing, but that you've started to see them clearly. You've removed the lens of idealization and now stand rooted in spiritual discernment. They'll call you cold. They'll say you've changed. But they won't mention how they once used your kindness as a weapon. They won't acknowledge the nights you cried yourself to sleep while they fed off your silence. Your growth is not convenient for them. It's confronting. It forces them to see that their power was never real, only borrowed from your pain. And now that you've reclaimed it, they stand exposed, powerless against your light. So they try again, not with violence, but with sweetness, confusion, nostalgia. They say, "I miss you," but what they mean is, "I miss controlling you." They ask for a second chance, but what they want is a second opportunity to drain you. Jung once said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. That's why they come back when you heal, because your transformation forces them to face the truth they've spent years avoiding. But you are no longer available for that role. You are not here to be their emotional crutch, their silent victim, or their spiritual hostage. You are walking in clarity now. Your energy is protected. Your soul is alert. And every time you say no, every time you block, walk away, or hold your peace, you are not being cruel. You are being whole. That is what spiritual strength looks like. And that is exactly why they fear you now. If this truth resonates with your soul, say it with conviction. My healing is mine. Their control ends with me. I choose peace over pain. Let this be your declaration of freedom. 7. The power of conscious response. When someone deliberately tries to harm you, to provoke you, to tear at your peace with precision, it's not always emotional chaos. Sometimes it's calculated. Carl Jung understood this and gave us a path not of retaliation, but of radical soul mastery. The strongest response to such intentional harm is not revenge. It is a conscious, grounded act that reveals your integrity and reclaims your spiritual authority. When you respond with calm presence instead of reactive rage, you break the invisible loop of shadow projection that the other person is unknowingly trapped in. You are no longer a mirror for their unconscious pain. You become a boundary. This is soul work, and it's not easy. It requires seeing the attack for what it is, a cry from their disowned self, projected onto you because your light disrupted their illusion. And yet, when you hold steady, when you respond rather than react, you do something alchemical. You protect your peace without becoming bitter. You maintain your dignity without needing validation. Jung taught that the unconscious, when left in the dark, will run your life, and those who hurt you often act from that very place, blind to their own shadow. But when you refuse to respond in kind, when you anchor in clarity and spiritual discernment, their shadow loses its grip. You are no longer feeding the dynamic with your energy, and in that moment, your soul speaks louder than any words. This is what spiritual strength looks like, not flashy defiance, but quiet self-possession. A refusal to let someone else's darkness dictate your light. A conscious choice to rise above the game rather than prove your worth inside of it. In doing so, you tell your nervous system that safety no longer depends on control, and that freedom is found in aligned restraint. It is not silence from weakness, but silence as sacred defiance. Their chaos cannot touch you if you no longer vibrate on the same frequency. You become untouchable, not because you fight harder, but because you've evolved beyond the need to fight at all. That is the power of the soul. Calm, discerning, unshakable, and it changes everything. 8. Your worth cannot be erased. No act of hatred, betrayal, or cruelty, no matter how calculated, can erase the value of your soul. Carl Jung's deep spiritual insight reveals that when someone sets out to harm you, it's not merely a moment of weakness or confusion. It's their shadow in action. This dark, unconscious part of their psyche projects its pain and envy onto you, not because of your flaws, but because of your light. You become a mirror, reflecting back to them everything they have suppressed, everything they fear, and everything they refuse to face within themselves. When they attack you, it's often because your growth threatens their stagnation, your healing threatens their wounds, and your truth threatens the illusions they live by. But none of this diminishes who you are. Your worth is not tied to their perception. Their hatred is not a measure of your failure. It is often proof of your evolution. Jung taught that the unconscious, when unacknowledged, directs human behavior in ways people don't understand. And when someone acts from that space, they are often unaware they are showing you who they are, not who you are. You may recognize this in real life. A jealous colleague who tries to block your success, a former friend who starts to compete with your peace, or a partner who subtly disrespects your boundaries once you begin to stand tall in your truth. These are not coincidences. They are spiritual echoes of shadow energy trying to pull you back into an old version of yourself. But you don't have to fight fire with fire. You don't need to prove your goodness, argue your innocence, or return the cruelty. Carl Jung believed in the silent victory of the awakened soul, the one who chooses not to retaliate, not because they are weak, but because they are wise. When you respond with silence, clarity, and grace, you win a battle they didn't even know they started. You rise beyond the battlefield and become untouchable, not because you're passive, but because you understand power differently. You know that real power is not loud, aggressive, or reactive. It is composed, rooted, and aware. I once knew a woman who was constantly disrespected by her supervisor at work, dismissed, sabotaged, talked down to. Everyone saw it. She never fought back with anger. She remained calm, did her work with excellence, and never stooped to pettiness. Months later, her quiet strength caught the attention of someone higher up, and she was offered a promotion that left her supervisor stunned and irrelevant. She didn't just succeed, she transcended. This is what Carl Jung meant when he spoke of transformation through awareness. When we stay conscious of who we are and refuse to let unconscious people drag us into their chaos, we don't just survive, we evolve. So when someone tries to destroy you, don't internalize it as truth. Recognize it as their soul's cry, their shadow lashing out, their spiritual immaturity mistaking destruction for control. Don't let them rewrite your story. Your soul is too sacred, your light too radiant, your journey too important. Hold your ground, speak only when necessary, and let your peace speak volumes. Because when you remain rooted in your worth, you teach others that no shadow can touch a soul that has remembered its light. And that is a truth Carl Jung would want you to live by, not just understand. To affirm your inner worth and the strength it takes to rise above betrayal, declare it now. Comment below. I know my value, to honor your journey and remind others that true power lies in silent self-respect. Thank you for joining us today on Spiritual Wisdom. If this message opened your eyes to hidden truths and helped you see human behavior in a deeper light, you're not alone. Carl Jung taught us that beneath every action lies a shadow, sometimes wounded, sometimes dangerous, but always revealing. As you move forward, stay aware, protect your peace, and trust your intuition. If you found this video insightful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Hit the notification bell so you won't miss any of our upcoming videos that guide you through the hidden layers of the soul and the truth behind human connection.